In this PowerPoint session, we are going to be thinking about how we can help our children to read. So how do children learn to read? Well, they need to have two elements in place. They need to understand language, so understanding words, vocabulary, and sentences. And they also need to recognize whole words and also recognize the different letters in words and put those together to read whole words using the process that we call phonics. Language understanding is a really important element to develop with your children. You can do this by talking with your children wherever and whenever you can. You can also do this by reading aloud to your child every day if possible. And school will provide books for you, as well as obviously you reading books that you might have at home. It's also really important to reread the same book lots of times. Children develop their language better when they have had repeated readings. And this can also help your child to develop a sense of favourite books. Where your child has favourite books and enjoys certain books over and over again, it's a very interesting marker of children who are very likely to become readers. It's also important to use pictures, use real experiences, things that you see on TV or on the computer, any pictures at all to talk about new words. And that's because the more words your child knows, the more success they are likely to have in school. The more words your child knows, the easier they will then learn new words. So helping us to develop your children's vocabulary by doing all that you can at home to talk with your children, to talk about new words, to show them new things and use the naming vocabulary, then the easier they are going to find the process of learning to read. Sometimes your child will be sent home with a book that doesn't have any words in it. And this is brilliant as a resource for you to talk with your child about the pictures together. Sometimes the pictures will form a little story. Talking about what that story might be, making that story up, and then telling it together several times over several days is another very important way that you can help to develop not just your children's language, but also some of their early interactions with books that they can, in effect, read for themselves. Bit by bit, you might want to encourage your child to say the made-up story themselves, to turn the pages when it's the right time to turn the pages in the telling of the story. One of the big elements that children have to learn about in school is phonics. Phonics is a very important element of children learning to read, and in the early stages of children reading, it is the most important aspect. We have to teach children to match the sounds of spoken English with letters and or groups of letters that represent those sounds. As part of phonics, children need to be able to blend and segment the sounds in the order in which they occur in a word. For example, if they hear cat, they need to know that that is the word cat. Or if they hear the word dog, for spelling, increasingly they need to be able to work out the sounds in that word and be able to say to you, d, o, g. This means we all need to pronounce our sounds, or we can call them phonemes, We need to pronounce our sounds as clearly and accurately as possible. In the past, phonics was perhaps taught by saying sounds like this: s, p, o, t. But we've found it's much harder for children to blend those sounds together to then say words. Much better to say this: s, o, t, because the pronunciation there makes it easier for children to blend those sounds, s, o, t, to make the word spot. So these are the pronunciations of the sounds as accurately as possible. It can help you to pause after each sound to try to say it back so that you are also working on accurate pronunciation. B, d, g, e, m, n, s, w, i, z, v, ch, You will have heard that with some of those sounds, we use our voice. For example, you can hear the sound of the voice from the voice box as well as the sound of the letter. Other letters do not use the voice. For example, we form that sound simply by changing the way in which our mouth is shaped and how our teeth are in relation to our mouth and our lips. Helping your child to pronounce their sounds or phonemes as clearly and correctly as possible is one of the ways in which you can help your child to learn to use phonics for reading more easily. On this chart, just to help you as adult learners, we have also put in examples of words and different ways to spell that particular sound. For example, the sound J can be represented with the letter J, like in jam, or DGE, like at the end of judge, or G by itself, for example, in the word giant, or indeed GE, for example, in the word barge. In all of those words, we are using a J phoneme or sound, but we are representing that in a number of different ways. We also have vowel sounds or vowel phonemes. These are often easier to pronounce. However, many of these have several different representations using different combinations of letters from the alphabet. Here are the sounds: a, e, o, a, e, I, o, u or u, o, or, ow, oi, e, and or your. Once again, on this chart, you have a number of different representations, so single letters or pairs or even three letters sometimes with an example word where that sound or phoneme is represented. So, for example, the sound E, the phoneme E, is spelt with EE in sweet, EA in heat, IE in thief, EE in these, a Y by itself in mummy, or an EY, for example, at the end of the word monkey. Children do not learn all of these in the very earliest stages, but by the end of year 1, they should be fluent with the knowledge of these letter and letter combinations. We call them graphemes. So in order to use phonics, we need to have the skills of blending and segmenting, and we need the knowledge of the alphabetic code, which, as we have seen on the previous 2 slides, can be very complicated. To help to develop your child's skills in being able to blend and segment, blending, remember, at, cat, and, which is blending, and for segmenting, for example, dog, d, o, g. There are a number of really nice activities that you can do that will help your child to build up their skills to being able to blend and segment, which is so important to being able to use phonics. For example, by playing I Spy with my little eye, something beginning with T. Trying to use the sound rather than the more traditional version where we use the letter name. Sometimes just allowing your child to make silly noises when playing, or indeed modelling making silly noises. For example, pushing the car along the floor. Those sorts of noises and your child articulating those noises can be very, very valuable towards being able to blend and segment. Reading rhyming stories or stories that have rhythm to them can also really help your child. And especially rereading lots of rhyming stories and stories with rhythm. Singing is incredibly valuable as a way in to developing children's blending and segmenting skills. So that might be singing simple rhymes and songs. And you'll find lots and lots of those on YouTube and at school. Even in F1, children will be bit by bit learning a range of rhymes and songs. And then sometimes just playing around with encouraging your child to blend in the context of objects. Would you like a, for example, and the child needs to work out that the word you've just segmented, a, can be blended back together to say the word cake. Try to encourage your child sometimes to give those same instructions to you, which is then encouraging them to do some segmenting. Okay. So blending and segmenting are 2 really important skills that will help us to help our children to use phonics in reading and spelling. At school, we teach them to tap sounds along their arm when they are segmenting especially. For example, the word spin would be spin. This physical movement seems to help some children to really focus on each individual sound. As well as learning all the sounds that are represented by letters, Children then will begin to learn letter names in both the lower and uppercase. They will start to do this partway through being in foundation stage 2. So around February time in foundation stage 2. And then there's lots of knowledge that children need. And that's where these come in, that we've already looked at. Thinking about the letter, single letters or combinations of letters that represent those sounds or phonemes. Sometimes we encourage children to mark sound buttons on to words so that they can see more clearly where those phonemes are. For example, in this word here, we have p, o. Let's try again. So in the next word, we have s, l, I, slip. And then things begin to get a little more complicated. So if we look at the next word, we can see s. These two letters, A and E, work together to make an A sound. So two letters that make one sound. I'm just going to join them like that. And then we've got O in there as well. S, A, O, scale. In this word, we've got L, and then two letters here, three letters here, or that make the or sound. Or, floor. We'll look at the next one. I, t. In that word, we have three letters again that make one sound. I, I, t, might. And in the last word, t, r, a, we have two letters here that make one sound, A, and two letters here that make one sound, So t, r, a, trainer. So let's talk now about Parks Primary School phonics scheme. It is based on a number of key principles. Each session is well-paced, using a review, teach, practice, apply, and handwriting structure. All children are expected to apply their phonics to reading books closely matched to their level, so that the children will have phonics books to read from. As they are moving on in their reading, they will sometimes have a second book as well, which will require them to use their phonics, but it will require them to apply a range of phonics learning. Children are also taught what we call red words or common exception words, and these are taught for both reading and spelling. We use a mnemonics, a way of helping us to remember some of the letters and combinations of letters that we are learning. And we use those based on a program called Read Write Inc., so published by Read Write Inc. And those mnemonics help children with their handwriting as well as a picture that will help them to remember the letter. We also use some mantras to support children to learn to apply their phonics to reading and spelling. We have actions that accompany each grapheme or each letter combination. And we also try to teach the children the correct terminology about phonics. So we do use the words phoneme and grapheme as children move through the phonics stages. Good letter formation also matters to developing children's early literacy skills. We teach children to form each letter correctly, starting and ending in the right place. If you would like more support for this or to understand that, then your teacher will be able to give you a handout that shows how we form each letter when we are printing. We learn phonics in school systematically. So we start with children learning to blend and segment and in foundation stage 1. And then in foundation stage 2, they go on to learn first the single letters and then 2 or 3 letters that make a sound. And also in foundation stage 2, they learn how to blend and segment really much trickier words where a number of consonants sit together, sometimes harder to hear. For example, splash, s, l, a, sh. And in year 1, children first revise those previous steps to make sure that they are comfortable and haven't forgotten any of their learning. And then quite quickly, they move into learning different letter choices for the same sound. So this is some of the vocabulary that we use. We use blending and segmenting, phoneme. We've not talked yet about digraph and trigraph. A digraph is what we describe where we have 2 letters that represent 1 sound, and a trigraph where we have 3 letters that represent 1 sound. A split digraph, as we saw earlier, is where we have 2 letters that represent a sound, but that they are split with a consonant. For example, earlier we had this, A, and then the letter L was in there, and an E on the end. In the word scale, we had a digraph earlier. We had A and I. And we also had a trigraph earlier. We had I, G, and H. And those 3 letters make 1 sound, I. AI, 2 letters, a digraph that says A, and split digraph, where we have 2 letters making a sound split by a consonant. Adjacent consonants or consonant clusters refer to that more difficulty that children can have in segmenting and blending. For example, s, l in splash, where children need to be able to hear each of those s, l, or whether they can blend those sounds together. And that is the vocabulary on that page for your reference. So in each lesson, the teacher reviews previous learning to develop children's automatic recognition of each of the different letters and letter combinations, the graphemes. They teach a new sound or phoneme with its grapheme. They read and write words with that new sound or phoneme in. And then they also read or write dictated sentences with that new sound and also previously learned sounds in. This helps them to keep revisiting the knowledge they've already been taught alongside their new knowledge. So we need to support children to help them to practice their phonics. And in school, we use charts, and sometimes we send home flashcards with the sounds on. But we also have tricky words. Tricky words are words where some of the letters in the word children have not yet learnt in their phonics, or it is a rare representation of a sound. Thinking about the word the, for example, they might know that TH is a V sound, but E representing an on the end is unusual. So we teach them using the colour red so that they just need to remember to stop and think that part of that word might be tricky. We send these home for your children to learn to read, and in year 1 for them to be able to read and spell. So when your child has begun learning phonics, they will begin to bring home reading books that help them to apply the phonics that they have learned so far. They need to read the book several times. First of all, to work out what each word says using the phonics that they know. Then to practice it to gain some fluency. Can they read it to make it sound a little bit like they are talking? They need to get to a point where they can read it so they don't have to work out any words, that they know those words well enough at sight and quickly without having to pause to work them out. So please allow your child to read their phonics book several times. Once your child has begun to learn the common alternative ways of representing some of the phonemes, then they will bring 2 books home, a benchmark level book and a phonic decodable book. They're going to read these both in school, but we would also like you to read them both at home because they help to support them in a number of different ways. Please also read their shared story aloud to them. Please ensure that you read that several times over the days that you have it. You might want to ask your child to comment on what's going on in the story. You might want to model that yourself to help your child to become really involved in the book, to really enjoy what's going on, and to spend time thinking about what it's all about. That doesn't mean that we would like you to do lots and lots of questioning. We think that just talking about books together is enough to really encourage your child to want to be a reader. Do please come into school to ask any questions that you might have. And also on an annual basis, we do run a session which takes a bit longer using these same materials, but giving you chance to talk and think and learn together with other parents, and also to ask questions straight away of the experts that are in the room. Remember, no question is a silly question. It is very likely that other people will need the answers to some of your questions too. So do come and talk to us about it if you are worried or anxious, or if you simply want to find out a little more. Thank you.